All right, it's Ethan Musolini, the merchant of success. Did I feel like, Greek? I don't know what this word, the word is, but yeah, snapping. Did I feel like snapping my fingers? I don't know what that means, but it's up to you to make a message out of that. Besides, it's snapping, it's body language. I'm communicating something, and body language is very powerful, and I will share with you why that is shortly. So these are the 5 segments that we go through. We look at the clarity, meaning we look at the what and why. We look at the mindset, what is the mindset required. We look at the specific strategies. We look at the skill sets required to deliver on that, and definitely the mastery. So that's the process I follow, because I believe if we follow through that 5-part process, then you should be able to get to the core message of what I am teaching or passing on. Let's get to the clarity segment right away. All right. All right. Thanks, Nathan. And so when we talk about body language, it's the unspoken element of communication that we use to reveal our true feelings and emotions, and I should also add, and messages, because sometimes it's not just the feelings or emotions, it's also the message. Sometimes you just speak using body language. I used to watch the movies. Sometimes you see these agents communicating and you see someone do that, meaning, yo, let's go, yeah? Let's go. They have not said anything, but from a distance, the other fellow knows, yeah, let's go. So it's not just the feelings and emotions, it's also the message. Now, when we talk about body language, this could be gestures, and it could also be the smile. Just smiling alone communicates something, meaning I'm happy. The pause and the nod, when you nod, actually the not that nod, because I know in computer speak, that means something big. I know there are even nodes in, there are even nodes in when it comes to crypto technology. I will remember what that is, but I know it's there. So the nod could be the pause or the nod, all that is part of body language. The posture, if I was like this, I'm communicating something. If I'm standing like that, I'm communicating something. So the posture speaks volumes. And for purposes of this segment, we are also going to add dressing, because dressing, the way you're dressed also is, because when you talk about body language, it's what people see. And so somehow, not somehow. So we're also going to add in the dressing part, because either way, how you're dressed is going to affect how your body looks or how you come across. So for the context that we are in, we are also going to talk about the dressing part. It could be the awe and wonder on the face. It could be also the sadness, all right? It may not be awe and wonder. It could also be sadness or pain or grimacing. And so all that is part of body language. So why is body language important? It's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it builds your own confidence. So there's, for example, when I'm teaching public speaking, I teach that, for example, when you're speaking and you do this, not at this level, but let's say at chest level, then this pulls up your body and you feel a little more confident. When you stand tall, you feel a little more confident. So it can build your confidence, or it can kill your confidence. For example, when you hunch down, you can't breathe properly, and that automatically affects your levels of confidence. The other key I know, for example, when you're walking a little fast, it pumps up more energy in your body, therefore you feel more confident. When you're very slow, it definitely lowers your confidence a bit. Number two, it improves on audience engagement. So if your face is just cold, your body is just motionless, it's not as engaging. But when you're using gestures, sometimes you see me using gestures, that's not by accident. For example, I cannot, If I was to speak to you for a full 1.5 hours like this, just steady, not moving, just like a statue, just like this, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue. We're going to talk about this. I mean, it would, it would even be a challenge for you to pick on what I'm talking about. But the fact that you see me moving or you see me using gestures, that automatically improves on audience engagement. It's part of what I teach in public speaking. I even actually did a whole public speaking masterclass. It's 10 modules. If either of you is interested, you can let us know. Also, great body language shows leadership. Do you know that, say, government agents, if they are going for, in terms of, say, controlling crowds, if in terms of picking up who the ringleaders could be, first signal is not just what they see the people doing, they look at the body language. And there's a body language of leadership, which is typically someone looking up, chin up, and then shoulders back. And one of the ways for you to train yourself is you could get a notebook and balance it on your body, on your head, and then that's the posture of leadership. Okay, so you can practice this at home. So let me see. So when you do that, so chest back, that's the posture of leadership. Chest back, looking up, not way high like that, but the way you will balance a notebook, that's how you should be looking ahead. Leaders look ahead, and that's the message. That's what you want to communicate. So body language alone, by how you carry yourself, is going to communicate leadership, or whether you're a leader or a follower. And as much as possible, if there's one thing you should take from this, is you need to practice the language or the body language of leadership, because that's why you're here anyway, to be a leader. It also builds trust. So if you, for example, what I mean by that is if you're calm and collected when you're talking to someone and you're engaged at that level, you're keeping eye contact as an example, that will build trust. But if you look fidgety, you're looking away, up and down, that makes people doubt you. It will make people question you, and that automatically lowers their trust in you. So how you come across with your body language is going to have a huge impact in terms of whether someone trusts you or doubts you. It also shows congruence or lack of it. So meaning you can use your body to show that you're congruent with your message or not congruent. This is what I mean by congruence. Congruence, I mean that your tone of voice, for example, and your body and the message are the same. For example, if you said, I am really happy to be here, someone is not going to believe you. Why? There's no congruence. So if you really want someone to believe you, okay, then let me see if I can, if I stop the share so that I demonstrate that. It's very important for me to demonstrate that. Okay, yeah, so for example, what I mean by congruence is if I say, I am happy to be here, most likely you won't believe me. But if I say, I'm happy to be here, okay, my smile, my tone of voice is communicating happiness. So you're most likely going to believe me in terms of what I'm saying. So when I say body language, so if I say, I believe in this, okay, then most likely you will doubt. But if I say, I believe in this, then the emphasis, the nodding is like, yes. But if you say, I believe in this, most likely people will doubt you. So body language is going to help you in terms of how people perceive your message, whether from the perspective of congruence. So meaning, is your message in alignment or in agreement with your body language, and that will influence whether people believe you or they don't. Also, in terms of the percentages, some of you have read my book, Public Speaking Secrets Exposed, and even some of you have attended the, who have access to the public speaking masterclass. You will recall that I quoted these numbers, and they're not just from me. I know it's from a famous guy called Mehrabian, and these numbers are, are widely believed to be close to the point of us concluding where body language is. Now, this is in the context of public speaking, when you're in front of people. Like right now, I'm doing public speaking because, again, you're able to see me and hear me and all that. So the way these numbers are distributed is that words typically contribute to 7%. The vocal, meaning the pitch, the tempo, the speed, the volume, always contributes to 38%. And when I say vocal, meaning if I was speaking like this, then you would also believe, process my message in a certain way. Then the 55%, the visual, it's both the body language and the dressing. Okay. So the visual is extremely important. Therefore, how you carry your body has a huge impact and bearing to how you're perceived when you're communicating. And I know sometimes when I put those numbers, people don't, but when I demonstrate it, when I demonstrate them, people get it. All right. All right, let's talk about the 4 major mindsets that strengthen body language, or that are useful for you to adopt when it comes to body language. Number 1 is to have the mindset that body language is the biggest contributor to communication. And that's super clear. And when I say biggest contributor, I mean when people are able to see you. Now, if you're on the phone, for example, the biggest contributor is your tonality or tone of voice. The tone will speak volumes. That's why you can be on phone and you ask someone, how are you? They're like, I'm fine. They're like, are you sure you're fine? Because the tone of voice doesn't sound fine. But when people are able to see you, it's the body language that is the biggest contributor. The second mindset, which I find very helpful, is to think, I might not have a second chance to impress again. Sometimes you may, but most times you don't. So therefore, you're better off thinking that I might not have a second chance to impress again. Therefore, this is the time, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the time for you to think that way. The third mindset, these are found to be true. I picked this from somewhere. That's not from me. That first impressions are lasting impressions. So when you pick that up, there are people I know I've met, and up to now, they are still in my mind because of how they were coming across, their energy, their vibe, their first impressions really stuck with me. And I'm sure if I was to ask you, all of you can relate to those moments whereby someone came into your life and you're like, whoa, what is this? And that image was etched into your mind permanently. The other mindset, which is very useful for you to take note of, is I'm judged in the first 5 seconds of contact. That's what it is. Now, some researchers put it to 7 seconds. I believe MTV believes in 7 seconds. But for now, just think in terms of 5 seconds. So within 5 seconds, people make conclusions about it. They're able to have a scan from head to toe. And then in those 5 seconds, someone is able to tell you're intelligent or not intelligent, you're sharp or not sharp, you're trustworthy or not trustworthy. We say that never judge a book by its cover, but guess what? We do judge books by their covers. All right? So that's what it is. And your cover, your ultimate cover, is your body language and how you're dressed. Now, typically when I say dress, because I'm working from home, I find it awkward to put on a suit at home, to be honest with you. But typically, if I was going for a formal meeting or formal engagement out there, typically I would always put on a suit or at least a jacket with a shirt, you know, because then that is part of my book cover, so to speak. And then the other body language tactics and techniques I'll be sharing with you as we move along. All right, let's now jump to strategies. Here are 5 strategies that will improve on your body language. So these are the 5, and then I'm going to expound on each. They're really dressing, standing posture, facial expression, communication strategy, and sitting posture, right? So all these are the 5 core pieces that you have to pay attention to. Let's start with dressing. So congruent dressing is important. Find out what the appropriate style is for that particular occasion and be dressed above the average. Whenever you aren't sure, be conservative and stay away from very shouting colors, highly pointed shoes for men, and very strong scents. Let me start from the bottom. Strong scents. So I know as you're spraying your body, all these scents, you may want to make a statement. And having said that, unless it is a social occasion or something like that, if you really want to communicate professionalism, stay away from very strong scents. For us guys, pointed shoes, not a good idea, of course, because they do not necessarily communicate professionalism, and yet that's part of what we want to put across. For ladies, by the way, when you put high heels are good. They, you know, they bring out your feminine self, your feminine, sexy self. So if you can, that's perfectly fine. And having said that, if you're not comfortable, please stay away from them. But you could use wedges as an example. And then the other thing also, sometimes I see ladies putting on, you know, huge earrings, you know, dangling up to the shoulders. You know, so people are just looking at the dangling things. Be aware of that. Very shouting colors are not highly recommended because as much as possible, you want to communicate sophistication and leadership. So common colors like blue, gray, or charcoal gray, those are colors that communicate leadership and sophistication. And I also mentioned that when you're not sure, be conservative. When you're, because there could be an occasion and you're not so sure about what the dressing style is. So the rule of thumb is you ask, what's the dress code? Because again, all this communicates, it impacts your body and everything, what they are seeing, because it's the body and the dressing. So the reason why we are paying attention to the dressing also is because the body is not working in isolation. You have a dress apart from, you know, those moments, apart from intimate moments where the dressing does not count. All right. But so long as you're out there, then the dressing counts because it's part of your whole body. All right. So that's why we are not isolating it. So ask, what is the dress code? Then follow along, because sometimes you could be overdressed or underdressed. If you're traveling out of the country, same thing. Find out what the cultural underpinnings are, what is required. If there are any special occasions or a dinner or a conference, again, double check what is the dress code, such that when they see you appear, they know that, okay, a leader has arrived. And there's also that line that be one level above the averagely dressed, especially if you're going to speak, if you're going to communicate to people. If you're not going to communicate or present to people, it's not a big deal. You can blend in so long as you keep the dress code intact. But if you're going to speak, then definitely be one level above the averagely dressed person or people there. And of course, if you need more detail, I go into detail this with the public speaking masterclass. But for this segment, I feel that is really enough to give you the core fundamentals. Standing posture. I mentioned that. I have already communicated what that is. you know, again, like for the benefit of some of us who are just joining us, stand tall, shoulders back, chin up, look ahead, steady. And always keep eye contact when you're talking to people, because if you don't keep eye contact, people will doubt you, they'll think you're hiding something, they'll question you, and you don't need that. Okay. So pull up your shoulders, stand tall, and of course you can practice form. The other technique I teach is you can imagine like there is a string in the center of your head, pulling you up, pulling your spine up. And then when your spine is straight, then when you walk, that's the posture that you want when you're standing. Now, for gentlemen, when you're standing, it's recommended that your feet are apart and they are shoulder broad. You know, where your shoulders stop, that's where your feet should be. So they're a little wider. For ladies, they don't have to be that wide, little inside, but 1 foot slightly in front. Then that's how you bring out your feminine self. So for the gents, your feet are apart, shoulder level, because then there you're bringing out your masculine self. So that's the rule of thumb. That's the distinction when it comes to standing. Facial expression. Okay. So what you need to do is giving a slight smile is always a good practice for you to have as a rule of thumb. When you're speaking or engaged with someone, you raise your eyebrows a little bit to show engagement and enthusiasm. That always helps a lot throughout the conversation. Show engagement, show some bodily expressions that tell the world that, hey, here I am, all right? And as much as possible, if you're able to keep a slight smile, like I've mentioned again, apart from context, of course, so all these things I'm mentioning, they are contextual. When I say contextual, meaning the environment, the conditions will influence. So if you are in a very sad situation, it may not help. Though I've noticed there are people whose demeanor is so wired to smiling that even in sad moments, they are able to smile and it still looks natural. Though those are very few. There's one I've ever seen. Communication strategy. So when I'm teaching public speaking, part of what I teach is use open gestures. So gestures like this. Let me showcase that. So open gestures like that. So when you're speaking, when the gestures are open like that, they communicate openness. And again, not up here, then you confuse people, but here. Let me see. Yeah. So open gestures. When you do this, when you use this gesture, ladies and gentlemen, this is a suppressive gesture. And I've seen even professionals do that. You're suppressing a person. This is a repressive gesture. Stay away from pointing fingers when you're communicating. This is an aggressive gesture. So when I'm teaching public speaking, something I stand against. So be aware of this. Mainly do that when you're speaking, whether one-on-one, seated, or just be aware of those little nuances. They make a big, big difference in terms of how you are perceived, right? Let's continue. Oh. Okay. Now, also you need to keep your hands away from areas that might distract people. For example, if you're there grabbing your chest, massaging your chest, people are like, what are you massaging? Relax your body. If you're very tense, but when I say relax your body, it starts with the mind, of course. You need to be mentally relaxed for the body to relax. Be relaxed. So when I say chest out, I don't mean you're like, oh, no, in a relaxed manner. And look interested, show that level of interest. When someone is speaking, show that level of interest, like, wow, please continue, please keep speaking. And I saw a question earlier, which I can add in here. Someone's asking, where should the hands be? In the pockets, backwards, ideally on the sides, on the sides of your thighs, straight. Because when you put them at the back, you're not communicating. And there could also be moments whereby you choose to stand. I remember there is a time I saw a gentleman. There was an event I was attending in Washington, D.C., and there was this army guy. He was holding his hands backwards and standing tall like this. And, he looked very impressive. But it all comes also with the attitude. What are you thinking about yourself? So as much as possible on the side, if I was talking to someone, I would keep my hands on the side. When you put them in your pocket, you're hiding them. And before you know it, you start playing around. And if you're a guy, you don't know what you might touch. And then it becomes very funny. So as much as possible, keep your hands on the sides, hanging loose and in a relaxed manner as often as possible. But there are no rules to this. If you are in an environment of, say, friends, and it's not a big deal, it's okay. You can keep your hands wherever it is. So again, context. If you're in a professional setting and these people are new, keep it professional, arms on the side. If you're with friends, there are no hard and fast rules. You have deep rapport, they know you, you connect, they still know that you care, whatever it is. So where you put your hands really is not a big deal, apart from picking your nose as an example. And yeah, so that's what I would say. All right, let's continue. Sitting posture. Number one, so the key thing is not to lean on your desk and put your head there. Also not to lean back in your chairs. This may seem like you are also unbothered by the conversation and it's not very professional. So there are guys who they kick back. And again, context. If you're speaking with friends or someone very close, like my friend Jose, sometimes you can be speaking and he puts his legs on the table. I really don't care. I've known him for over 20 years. So what he does, I really don't care. I know that he cares. So then also, this is a big one. Crossing arms. Crossing arms is a biggie. So when you cross arms, typically it communicates that you're closed, and you don't want to communicate being closed. And this is one of the most common mistakes I see. Now, for you, it could be that you just feel comfortable, but that's not how the other people will interpret it. They will interpret it that you're just closed off, which is not a good conclusion for people, which is not a good image to pass on, that you're closed down. And it may also show that you're not paying attention or you're not fully engaged in the conversation, or you're not buying the conversation. Now, even when you're not buying the conversation, that's not a good point for you to communicate that. You need to keep your cards close to the chest, closer to the chest, so to speak. So as much as possible, for example, when you're seated, keep your palms open again on the side, but please stay away from crossing the arms. Again, I know some of us, you feel comfortable doing that, and I've seen it in a couple of times when people come, I can tell that they are engaged, but they feel comfortable crossing their arms. And tell you what, why some of you know my style, I give them feedback, all right? So, all right. Dorothy says, when I was living in Accra, I got a culture shock. In Uganda, we love colors like black, red, white for weddings and parties. In Ghana, however, those are funeral colors for celebrating the life of a deceased. The colors vary with the age group of the deceased, all right? So hence my point of view, if you're going into a new culture, please ask, dress code, colors, find out, such that you're not the odd man or odd woman out. Okay. Crossing legs, please guide. All right, so crossing legs, so I would say crossing legs, again, it depends. Crossing legs, generally speaking, it's not a big deal, depending on how you cross them. Also, and the context and the situation, If it's a very formal arrangement, you're going for an interview as an example, I wouldn't cross the legs. Yeah, I would keep them away, so to speak. But if it's not an extremely, how do you call it? If it's not an extremely conservative professional setting, then it's okay to cross legs, as long as you. And having said that, I've seen some ladies in mini skirts crossing legs, and in my view, that's not. I wouldn't recommend that. Folding hands in the chest, people think that it's okay, that they are being polite. No, they are not being polite. So then seeing someone was commenting, let me see. Okay. Huh. Let me see something here. In panel conversations during TV, I see many panelists doing that, crossing legs. Again, like I've mentioned, a panel and all that, depending on who and the situation, there are people who feel very comfortable crossing legs. Again, like I mentioned, context. It's not a deal breaker in my view. What I'm saying, if it's extremely professional setting, for example, you're going for an interview, I wouldn't do that. If you're on a panel and you feel more comfortable that way, and of course you're dressed appropriately, it wouldn't be a big deal, in my view. Okay. If and also one needs to, is someone who's, what about, is someone who's, okay, let me first pause. All right. Yeah. Skill sets. So here is the formula for building positive body language. Number one, awareness. What kind of person or brand do you want to put out there? So for me, part of the brand I want to put out there is that of leadership, it's confidence, it is happiness, it is positive vibe. So therefore, but you have to know. You have to know. That's why we talked about personal branding at the beginning of this series. That's why it starts from. It's not just body language for the sake of body language. It's also a body language that helps communicate the brand that you want to put across. I'll give you an example. So when you see these presidents, as an example, I recall, like for Obama, whenever he would be going to get onto Air Force One, he would trot, he would run. So it wasn't because he wanted to save 10 seconds of climbing the Air Force One. It's just that he knows the cameras are on him. So he wants to communicate, hey guys, I am fit, I'm ready to lead you. I still have a lot of energy inside me. That's what he was doing, period. So it's you being aware of what you want to, what your brand is, and then it starts from there. Then it will influence how you behave. Then prepare and have the intention. Number one, put your wardrobe to order. Choose the best outfit for the occasion. Practice how you intend to use your gestures and posture. How are you going to sit? How are you going to walk? You see, these world-class leaders, these are things they think through. And that's one of the reasons they lead us. So you need to lead your life. You need to know what you want to put out there, first and foremost. Next, best practice. What is the best practice for this particular occasion? The best dress. Should I be walking? Should I be running? Should I sit in front? Should I sit behind? Should I be show interest? Should I show coldness or calmness? By the way, when you're in a negotiation, for example, just showing so much interest is not a good idea. So you want to, as much as possible, to keep a poker face, as an example. So some of these things I'm talking about, in some contexts, they may be useful. In other contexts, they may not be useful. So use your wisdom. It's called emotional intelligence. Use emotional context intelligence. I believe that should be, Samantha, please help me capture this, or Nathan. Emotional context intelligence, that should be it. So depending on the context, then you engage what you want to see happen. Step 4, keep the message and body language congruent. So meaning if you're sad, then you have to be conscious. Am I wearing a sad face when I'm talking about this sad moment? If you're happy, you need to bring your mental awareness to say, okay, is my face communicating happiness or not? Because ultimately, you want to make sure that your message and body language are one, period. So then, of course, you need to make sure that your body is, is congruent. And what I mean by that is all these strategies that we are talking about, you combine all of them in one go. You're thinking in terms of, okay, how do I combine all this? Because it's a system. For example, you need to pay attention. I need to stand tall, you need to relax, smile, the eye contact, make sure that the arms are not crossed when I'm communicating. Also pay attention to the people who you're talking to. And by the way, guys, this as a side note, I've also been in moments whereby you are in a meeting and there's this beautiful lady who comes in and the guy is like, hey, check your emotions. Pretend as if you're not very interested. Even if you are interested, it's normal, I understand. But don't not make it so obvious. Now you're with a client and you're just drooling. You're not even listening. So relax, check your emotions. Also beware not to look far away in the distant places. Focus on the personalities or characters before you. Okay. Very, very important. Then the other thing I noticed when it comes to sitting, so when you're seated in a chair, sit upright. That's number one. Number two, find a position that you know, like when part of what I do is I coach people on how to pass oral interviews. And one of the techniques I teach them, which I feel is useful for all the different contexts of sitting, is find a position which you know you can hold for a long time without shifting a lot. So what you do is find a position, sit there, and as much as possible, stay stable there. Reason being, if you're in these rocking chairs, for example, and you keep turning around, by the way, for me, I think this particular business opportunity, we need to pay attention, and you're turning around like this, that's very destructive. It's also telling the person that you're not in control. So one of the reasons why you want to stay stable or steady in one place is it communicates that, hey, I am in charge of my body. So fidgeting, turning around, left, right, center, it's passing, it is, you're telegraphing, telegraph is no longer a common word. You're broadcasting a message, yeah, that's more accurate. You're broadcasting to the people before you that you don't have control over your body. So if you don't have control over your body, why should I trust you with bigger things? So that's one of the reasons why you need to find a stable place and then stay there. And of course, I talked about you not leaning on the table, and just it's also okay. Here is another segment when I'm teaching people, when I'm coaching my clients about public speaking, they wonder that should you use your gestures even when you're seated? Absolutely, because I will tell you, when you're talking to your friends, I guarantee you always use your gestures even when you're seated. Then next is vary your style. What do I mean by vary your style? Vary your style means you vary your style of clothing, as an example, in that you're not always predictable. Unless, this is a big unless, there are certain personalities who have chosen a certain style and they have chosen it to be part of their branding. There are guys who have, for example, chosen to always have bow ties. It's part of their branding. I know the late Steve Jobs always always had a black pony. That's part of, it was a conscious branding strategy. So unless that's the case, then you can vary your style, start you a little unpredictable, so to speak. Preparing and having an intention, is that a daily strategy or way of thing? Not even a strategy, it's a tactic that you should be aware of on a daily basis, because you need to live in awareness. You need to be proactive. You need to be intentional and strategic. Successful people are always intentional about the things they do or don't do. So that's where it's coming from. Then someone has to throw more light about best practice. What's the best practice for this particular occasion? Best practice means what's the world-class standard around this? Now, do I always ask myself that question? No. What I'm saying, it's an extremely useful practice or to always have at the front of your mind, because you want to be the best of the best, and you're here to be among the best of the best. You don't want to be average. That's why you want to look for best practice. If you really wanted to be average people are they are just hanging out right now. They are not learning. So you're here to be a better version of yourself. I always share with my private clients that you need to aim to become the best version of you. Therefore, if you're to be the best version of you, then you have to look for best practice. That's where I was coming from. In terms of mastery, number one, make wardrobe changes in the next 3 months if you can. Then number two is get a crowd of at least 10 people and talk to them while using the 6 steps given above. So what you do is the crowd, I know, so that's your, and of course, we are still in these times. If you're watching this recording and you are not able to find 10, just use the family members. Or you could actually have an online meeting, so to speak, to engage the 6 steps. Especially the 6 steps, these things to say, okay, are you aware of the brand you want to put across with these people? Have you prepared accordingly? Have you thought about the best practice? How can you make sure that your message is congruent with your body language? Are you relaxed? Are you paying attention to being relaxed? You're smiling, you're standing tall, and all this, keeping your arms open, not crossed, and varying your style. Have you created any distinction of surprise? So they're like, oh, wow. No, once in a while, of course, that's not a rule. So number 6 is not a biggie, but the first 5 are biggies, if I may use that language. Also, the next, so this evening, what I want you to also reflect upon is, what did you find most useful in this presentation? And besides that, what are you going to do differently? What are you going to implement in the lessons moving forward in your life, career, and business? What are you going to do differently to implement these segments in your life, career, and business? So that's something to reflect upon this evening. Olivier says, uncomfortable attire affects one presentation or communication style. Absolutely. So make sure that you're comfortable indeed. Don't just follow the styles for the sake of it. Should be something that you're comfortable with, definitely. Emmanuel asks, what about crossing hands from behind? Yeah, so like crossing hands from behind, if you're with friends and that sort of thing, or you're just in the bank waiting, I sometimes honestly feel more comfortable that way. What I'm saying is, if you are in a situation that requires communication or to make your case, or everything you're doing is under scrutiny, I would keep the hands on the side, hanging on the side comfortably. That's what I would do. Godfrey says, in Uganda, flapping thighs while seated for the ladies is obscene and has a funny meaning. Okay. All right, there you go. Thank you, Godfrey, for alerting us about that. see. Godfrey is asking, my communication staff used to ask me to have a power pause as a head of HR while taking photos for the annual report. How does this relate with the sitting posture? So again, it depends. If it's really, because whenever you're packaging a message, you want to communicate something. So if, for example, the annual report, you feel you want to communicate power and I'm in charge, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you have a proper pose that looks professional. That's all I would say. Just make sure that the pose is professional and communicates that you're a leader, so to speak. Now, how that can be communicated with photos, there are so many different iterations or options. So it's really up to you. Cool.